My mother-in-law spent years calling me the placeholder. When she got sick, she called asking if I'd help with her estate. I listened quietly, then said, "Ask the one you were holding out for." She went silent. I hung up. That weekend, I took my daughter to the park and told her, this is what breaking a cycle looks like. I met Rick when I was 26. We were both living in Charlottesville, Virginia. He was wrapping up law school, and I was working at a local credit union. He came in one afternoon to open a new account. I remember he had this old leather messenger bag and a tired smile, and we just started talking. 2 weeks later, we had dinner. 3 months later, we moved in together. I knew early on he was it for me. It wasn't fireworks or romance movies. It was quiet mornings and long talks and a steady kind of love. I'd had enough of the other kind. I wanted someone solid. Rick was solid. What I didn't know back then was that I wasn't who his mother had in mind. Not even close. The first time I met Judith, she didn't look me in the eye. She hugged Rick, told him he looked too skinny, and asked if he was still going to that gym she liked. Then she looked over at me and said, "Oh, you must be the girlfriend." No name, just the girlfriend. I introduced myself. She nodded, didn't smile, just moved on like I was someone he brought home from work. I thought maybe she was just having a bad day, or she was protective. I told myself it would get better. It didn't. At first it was little things, passive comments. "You make your mashed potatoes that way?" "Oh, Rick always liked it when Allison made her chili with cinnamon. But this is nice too." That name, Allison, started showing up more and more. I asked Rick who she was. "My ex-high school and part of college. We broke up years ago." I asked, "Why does your mom bring her up all the time?" He laughed like it was no big deal. "She just liked her. She'll come around to you." She didn't. One night, early in our relationship, we had dinner at her house with some extended family. Judith waited until I stepped into the kitchen to help clear dishes. That's when I heard her. "She's fine, I guess," she said to her cousin. "But she's not the one. She's just the placeholder. Rick'll figure that out sooner or later." I stood there with a stack of plates in my hands, hearing every word. I didn't confront her. I didn't cry. I just walked back in, placed the dishes down, and smiled like nothing happened. But I didn't forget. Rick and I got married a year later. Judith wore blue instead of the dress I picked for her. She pouted in all the photos. She gave a speech where she said, "I always imagined this day differently, but here we are." Still, I tried. Every damn holiday. Every birthday. Every time Natalie got sick and we needed help. I let Judith into our home. I called her Mom, even though it felt fake. I brought her flowers. I included her in our lives. She never accepted me. When I got pregnant with Natalie, she told me I looked whiter than she expected for someone having one baby. After Natalie was born, she told me I should keep my figure while I'm still young. But she loved Natalie. That was real. She doted on her, spoiled her, took pictures every visit. And part of me thought, maybe this is the bridge. Maybe this is how we connect. Nope. At Natalie's third birthday party, Judith cornered me while I was cutting cake. "You've done well for a placeholder," she said, smiling like it was a compliment. "I'll give you that." I put the knife down before I said something I'd regret. Fast forward a few years. Rick's practice was doing well. I'd taken a step back from work to focus on home. Natalie was in kindergarten. Judith was still around, still cold. She called often but only asked about Rick or Natalie. Never me. If I picked up the phone, she'd say, "Is Rick there? Or can you put Natalie on?" Then last August, we got the news. Stage 4 cancer. Judith had known for a few months, but hadn't told anyone. Rick was wrecked. I wasn't. She didn't even tell us herself. A nurse from the hospital called because Judith listed Rick as her emergency contact. That's how we found out. Rick went to visit. Took Natalie once. I stayed back. A week later, she called me. Just me. I let it ring. And ring. Finally, I answered. Her voice was different, softer, maybe scared. "I was wondering," she said, If you could help me with my estate stuff. The paperwork. The will.
I
I trust you. I didn't say anything right away. Then I said, slow and clear, ask the one you were holding out for. Silence. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up. That weekend, I took Natalie to the park. She was wearing her favorite yellow hoodie, the one with the sunflower patch. She ran to the swings. I watched her for a long time. She came over with a juice box and sat next to me. I looked at her and said, "This is what breaking a cycle looks like." She smiled, not knowing what I meant.
But one day she will.
Judith didn't call again after that. Rick didn't mention it either. I don't think she told him what I said. Or maybe she did, but he knew better than to bring it up. Things at home stayed normal for a while. We went on with our lives. Natalie started first grade. Rick took on more clients. I started doing part-time bookkeeping from home. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Judith. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed formal, almost cold. Just a few paragraphs. She said she had reconsidered things. That she didn't want there to be bad blood between us. That she hoped I would rise above old misunderstandings. She even said, family is family. I read it 3 times. The whole thing felt fake. What really got me, though, was the last line. I always knew you were capable. That's why I chose you to handle what matters most.
Chose me?
Like this was some test? I didn't respond. I shredded the letter. I didn't even tell Rick. But 2 weeks later, Rick got a call from her lawyer. She's making changes to the will, he told me one night, pacing our living room. She's naming you as the executor, not me. I stared at him. Why would she do that? He looked confused. I don't know. She said you're the only one she trusts to make sure it's all handled the right way. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Not a happy laugh, one of those bitter, sharp ones that comes out when something is just too ridiculous. Rick sat down. Is there something I should know? I wanted to tell him everything. Every insult. Every little stab she'd made over the years. Every time she made me feel like I was nothing. Instead, I just said, she's dying. Let her die how she wants. Rick didn't press. He never liked conflict. That's how Judith raised him. Avoid. Smile. Keep the peace. A month passed. Then another. Judith started hospice care. She didn't ask to see me. Just Natalie. Rick took her twice. I let him. I didn't want Natalie growing up with holes in her story. I wanted her to make her own choices when she was older. But I told Rick clearly, if she says anything sideways to her, it ends. He promised. One afternoon, after school, Natalie walked into the house quiet. Usually she burst in, talking about recess or her friend Ellie or the school lunch. But this time she just sat down at the kitchen table and started drawing. "What's up, baby?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She didn't look up. "Nana said something weird," she mumbled. "She said you weren't supposed to be here." My stomach dropped. I kept my face calm. "What do you mean?" She said, "Daddy was meant to marry someone else. But you got there first." I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking. Rick came home 10 minutes later and found me in the laundry room, staring at the dryer door like it had answers. "She talked to Natalie," I said flat. He paled. "I didn't know. I was in the kitchen. She was in the bedroom with her. She told her I wasn't supposed to be her mom." Rick didn't defend her this time. He just sat down on the floor. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't know what to say." I didn't say anything back. I just left the room and went to bed early. That night, I slept on the couch. I started seeing things differently after that. The damage Judith had done wasn't just to me. It was to Natalie now. To Rick. It wasn't just coldness anymore. It was poison. And the worst part? She was still trying to win. By naming me executor, she thought she was pulling some final string. Controlling how she'd be remembered. Forcing me to carry her mess. She didn't want peace. She wanted power. 2 weeks later, we got the call. Judith had passed. It was early in the morning. Rick's phone rang while we were still in bed. He answered, said nothing for a long time, just nodded and whispered, "Okay. Thank you." Then he hung up and told me. I felt nothing. Not relief. Not sadness. Just an empty space where a feeling should have been. Like a room where the lights had gone out. Rick cried in the shower. Natalie asked a lot of questions. Where did she go? Is she in heaven? Will she still see me? I answered what I could.
I held her longer that day.
The funeral was small, private. Judith had planned every detail in advance, right down to the flowers and music. It was at a chapel she used to volunteer at, just outside of town. Rick asked me to sit in the front with him and Natalie. I did for their sake, not for hers. Afterward, at the reception, her lawyer approached me. Middle-aged man in a gray suit, skin like paper. He shook my hand and said, "She left a letter for you. And instructions." I almost told him to shove it, but I didn't. I took the envelope and waited until we got home. Rick went to lie down. Natalie was with her tablet. I sat in the kitchen and opened it. It was handwritten this time. Neat cursive. Expensive paper. 3 pages. The first line stopped me cold. "If you're reading this, then I've finally gotten what I wanted. Your full attention." I read the whole thing twice. Then a third time. My hands didn't shake this time. They burned. The letter wasn't an apology. It was a test. A final test. She said she'd always questioned whether I had what it took to be part of their family. Said she pushed me for a reason. "You were too soft. Too accommodating. I wanted to see if you had a backbone." She actually congratulated me for hanging up on her, for refusing to help with her estate. And now, she was forcing me to deal with everything she left behind. The will, the assets,
The debts. The house.
and a trust fund. For Natalie. With a catch. The trust was set up with a delayed release. Judith had placed rules on it. Conditions. Natalie could only receive the full amount, $200,000, when she turned 25 and had completed either a law degree or medical school. Not only that, but Judith had made it clear in her instructions. If those conditions weren't met, the money would be donated to a private charity in Judith's name. It wasn't about helping Natalie. It was about shaping her, controlling her future from beyond the grave. I sat there for over an hour, just staring at the document. Rick found me like that. He picked up the papers. "Read them." "This is messed up," he said finally. "She had no right. She planned this," I whispered. "Every inch of it." He nodded.
Yeah.
"She did." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about everything she'd done.
The word she used.
The way she got inside Natalie's head before she died. The way she was still pulling strings from 6 feet under. But I also realized something else. She thought this was her final move. She thought she'd won. But what she didn't know, what she could never imagine, is that I was finally done playing by her rules. The next day, I made a pot of coffee and sat down at the table with every document she left behind. The will, the trust fund paperwork, the letters, the power of attorney form she'd signed before dying, naming me her executor. It was all legal, all airtight. Judith had made sure she controlled the money, even from the grave. But she'd made one mistake. She trusted me to carry it out. She thought naming me executor was a way to force me into obedience.
To trap me.
To test me one final time. She didn't understand that giving me power meant I could finally use it for something she never expected. I called the lawyer the next morning and asked him to meet in person. We sat down at his office, just the two of us. I asked every question I needed to. Then I asked the one that mattered. What happens if I resign as executor? He blinked. You don't want to serve? No, if you step down, we'll have to go to the secondary listed executor. Or the court can appoint someone. I smiled. Perfect. He frowned. May I ask why? Because she doesn't get to have the last word. I said. Not anymore. I left that office feeling lighter than I had in years. I told Rick later that night. We sat on the back porch, and I told him everything. What the letter said, what the trust rules were, how she'd written it all like a damn chess match. I stepped down, I told him. Let her golden girl cousin take it over. She'll follow the rules to the letter. Rick looked at me for a long time. Then he said something I'll never forget. You know, I think my mom always believed she was the smartest person in the room. But she never really saw people. Not for who they are. He took my hand. She never saw you. But I do.
That almost broke me.
A few months later, we set up a new account in Natalie's name. Not from Judith. From us. It wasn't 200 grand, but it was real. And it came with no strings. She can use it for school, travel, a business, whatever life she wants. We'll add to it every year. And when she's older, I'll tell her everything. The truth, not just the cruel things Judith did, but the parts where I stayed silent too long. Where I put on a smile when I should have stood up. Where I let someone treat me like a placeholder, even though I knew better. I want Natalie to know where she comes from, but I also want her to know where the chain broke. Judith's cousin ended up managing the estate. She followed the rules. When Natalie's old enough, the trust will be there, waiting. If she wants it, she'll have to live her life by Judith's terms. Or she'll walk away from it just like I did. Because money isn't worth your peace. Last weekend, we went to the same park where I first told Natalie about breaking cycles. She's older now. Wiser. She asked, "Do you still think we broke the cycle?" I looked around. Families laughing. Parents chasing their kids. The sun setting behind the trees. "Yes," I said. "And we're never going back."